You know that moment when someone crushes your dreams so completely that it changes the entire trajectory of your life? Well, that happened to me on a rainy Tuesday morning in downtown Seattle. And the woman who did it? She had no idea she was creating her own worst nightmare. I walked into the glass tower of Meridian Solutions, my portfolio clutched tightly in my sweaty hands. 22 years old, fresh out of college, and desperate to land my first real job in corporate consulting. The lobby was all marble and chrome, the kind of place that makes you feel small just by existing in it. The elevator ride to the 15th floor felt like an eternity. I'd practiced my pitch 100 times in the mirror, but nothing could have prepared me for what was about to happen. "You must be Jake," said the receptionist, a kind-looking woman in her 50s. "Ms. Richardson will see you now." Margaret Richardson. I'd researched her extensively. Head of HR, 15 years with the company, known for her directness. What I didn't know was that she was having the worst day of her career, and I was about to become her punching bag. Her office was intimidating. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Seattle skyline, and her desk was the size of a small aircraft carrier. She didn't look up when I entered. "Sit," she commanded, still typing furiously on her laptop. I perched on the edge of the chair, trying to project confidence I didn't feel. After what felt like an hour, but was probably 2 minutes, she finally looked up. Her eyes were cold, calculating. "So, Jake Morrison, University of Washington, business degree, 0 experience." She flipped through my resume like it was contaminated. "Tell me, what makes you think you belong here?" I launched into my prepared speech about passion, dedication, and fresh perspectives. She interrupted me halfway through. "Stop." Her voice was ice. "Do you see this office? Do you see where you are right now?" I nodded, confused. "This is Meridian Solutions. We handle multi-million-dollar accounts. Fortune 500 companies trust us with their most critical projects." She leaned back in her leather chair, a cruel smile playing at her lips. "And you think we're going to hand that responsibility to someone who's never even held a real job? I may not have experience, but you have nothing." She stood up, towering over me. "You're a junior, a nobody, and frankly, I'm insulted that you even applied here." The room was spinning. This wasn't going how I'd imagined. "Ms. Richardson, if you could just look at my academic record." She laughed. Actually laughed. It was the kind of laugh that stays with you, haunts your dreams. "Academic record? Kid, this is the real world. We don't waste time with juniors who think a degree makes them special." She walked to her door and opened it. "Security will escort you out. And do yourself a favor. Next time, apply somewhere more appropriate to your skill level. Maybe a coffee shop." The security guard was gentle but firm. As we walked through the lobby, I felt dozens of eyes on me. The walk of shame. The receptionist looked sympathetic, but that somehow made it worse. Standing on the sidewalk, rain soaking through my suit, I made a promise to myself. Margaret Richardson had just made the biggest mistake of her life. She thought she was getting rid of a problem. What she'd actually done was create her replacement. That humiliation, it was just the beginning of my story. Because sometimes, the best revenge is massive success. 5 years. That's how long it took me to go from that humiliated kid on a Seattle sidewalk to the CEO of my own consulting firm. And every single day of those 5 years, I thought about Margaret Richardson's laugh. I didn't go home and cry. I didn't give up. I got angry, the productive kind of angry that builds empires. Within a week, I'd landed a job at a smaller consulting firm across town. The pay was terrible. The office was a dump, but it was a start. I worked 18-hour days, took on every project no one else wanted, and studied my clients' businesses like my life depended on it. My first client was a struggling tech startup. Their founder, Sarah Chen, was brilliant, but drowning in operational chaos. I spent 3 months reorganizing their entire business structure, and when they landed their Series A funding 6 months later, Sarah called me her secret weapon. Word spread. In the consulting world, success stories travel fast. Soon I was handling bigger clients, learning from every mistake, building a reputation as the guy who could solve impossible problems. But I wasn't just building a career. I was building a weapon. By year 3, I'd saved enough to start my own firm. Morrison Consulting. 1 employee, me. 1 client, a mid-sized manufacturing company that Meridian Solutions had rejected as too small. I turned that too small company into a $10 million success story. The consulting world is smaller than you'd think. Stories travel, reputations spread, and soon everyone knew about the young hotshot who was stealing clients from the big firms, including Meridian Solutions. Year 4 was when things got interesting. My firm had grown to 12 employees, and we were handling clients that would have made 22-year-old me's head spin. But I still remembered every detail of that interview. The cold office, the cruel smile, the security escort. I started researching Meridian Solutions obsessively. Their client list, their financial reports, their leadership team. Margaret Richardson was still there, still crushing dreams, still thinking she was untouchable. What she didn't know was that several of her biggest clients were getting frustrated. Meridian had grown complacent, resting on their reputation while delivering mediocre results. The corporate world is ruthless that way. Yesterday's success means nothing if you can't deliver today. That's when I made my move. I started reaching out to Meridian's clients. Not to poach them, not yet. Just to introduce myself, to plant seeds. If you ever need fresh perspectives on your consulting needs, here's my card. The first major client to jump ship was Thompson Industries. Their CEO, David Thompson, was fed up with Meridian's cookie-cutter approach to his unique challenges. When he called me, I was ready. Jake, I've heard incredible things about your firm. Margaret Richardson keeps telling us that our account is too complex for smaller firms. But honestly, we're not seeing the results we need. 3 months later, Thompson Industries was Morrison Consulting's biggest success story, and Margaret Richardson was scrambling to explain to her board why they'd lost a $3 million annual contract. But losing 1 client wasn't enough. I wanted her to feel what I'd felt that day. Powerless, humiliated, replaced. The best part? She still had no idea who I was. To her, I was just another competitor eating away at her empire, but I was about to become her worst nightmare. Revenge isn't a dish best served cold. It's a dish best served with surgical precision and a side of poetic justice. And I was about to serve Margaret Richardson the meal of her lifetime. By year 5, Morrison Consulting had become the hottest name in Seattle's consulting scene. We'd grown to 30 employees, occupied 2 floors of a downtown high-rise, and our client list read like a who's who of successful companies. But I wasn't satisfied. I wanted Meridian Solutions. All of it. The opportunity came when I learned that Meridian was struggling. 3 major clients had left in the past year, 2 of them to us, and their parent company, Apex Holdings, was considering a complete overhaul of their consulting division. That's when I discovered something beautiful. Apex Holdings was looking for an acquisition. I spent 2 months crafting the perfect proposal, not just to acquire Meridian Solutions, but to completely restructure it. New management, new processes, new culture. Everything Margaret Richardson had built, I was going to tear down and rebuild in my image. The presentation to Apex Holdings board was scheduled for a Thursday morning. I'd requested that all current Meridian leadership be present for the consultation phase of the acquisition discussion. Margaret Richardson would be there. She'd sit in that conference room, listening to me explain why her entire operation needed to be scrapped. She still wouldn't know who I was, but she'd feel her world crumbling around her. The night before the presentation, I couldn't sleep. I walked around my apartment, practicing my speech, looking at the photos on my wall. My team, our clients, our success stories. And tucked away in a corner, printed on plain paper, was a photo I'd found online. Margaret Richardson at some corporate event, still smiling that same cruel smile. Tomorrow, I would wipe that smile off her face forever. I arrived at Apex Holdings' headquarters an hour early. The building was even more impressive than Meridian's. All glass and steel, reaching toward the sky like a monument to corporate power. The irony wasn't lost on me. 5 years ago, I'd been escorted out of a building just like this one. The conference room was on the 32nd floor, with windows that overlooked the entire city. I set up my presentation, adjusted my tie, and waited. At exactly 9:00 a.m., they filed in. The Apex Holdings board members, stern-faced executives in expensive suits, and then the Meridian leadership team. Margaret Richardson entered last, still commanding the room with her presence. She was older now, grayer, but that same arrogant confidence radiated from her every step. She took her seat at the far end of the table, glanced at me with the dismissive look she probably gave every vendor, and opened her leather portfolio. "Ladies and gentlemen," began Robert Apex, the company's CEO, "thank you for joining us today. We're here to discuss Morrison Consulting's proposal for the acquisition and restructuring of Meridian Solutions." I stood up, clicked to my first slide, and looked directly at Margaret Richardson. "Thank you, Mr. Apex. My name is Jake Morrison, and I'm here to explain why Meridian Solutions is failing and how I'm going to fix it." She looked up from her notes. For just a moment, our eyes met. I saw something flicker across her face. Confusion, maybe recognition, but then it passed, and she went back to her dismissive expression. She still didn't remember me, but she was about to. I had spent 5 years building toward this moment, and now, with 37 people in suits hanging on my every word, I was about to deliver the presentation that would end Margaret Richardson's career. There are moments in life when the universe aligns perfectly, when years of preparation culminate in a single devastating blow. This was mine, and Margaret Richardson was about to learn that karma doesn't forget. "The consulting industry is built on relationships, trust, and results," I began, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. "Unfortunately, Meridian Solutions has been failing on all 3 fronts." I clicked to my next slide, Meridian's client retention statistics. The numbers were brutal. In the past 2 years, Meridian has lost 37% of their major clients. Their customer satisfaction scores have dropped to an industry low of 2.3 out of 5. And their revenue? Down 41%. Margaret Richardson's face was stone, but I could see her jaw tighten. She was starting to understand that this wasn't just a friendly acquisition meeting. "The problem isn't market conditions," I continued. "The problem is leadership that's out of touch with modern business realities. A culture that prioritizes arrogance over results. A human resources department that drives away talent instead of nurturing it." I clicked again. Client testimonials filled the screen. Damning quotes about Meridian's service quality, their outdated methods, their condescending attitude towards smaller accounts. "This is what your clients really think of you," I said, looking directly at Margaret. "While you were telling them how privileged they were to work with Meridian, they were looking for alternatives." Robert Apex leaned forward. "Mr. Morrison, these are serious allegations. What's your solution?" "Complete restructuring. New leadership. New processes. New culture." I clicked to the next slide. Morrison Consulting success stories. "We've taken 17 former Meridian clients and increased their satisfaction scores to 4.8 out of 5. We've grown their businesses by an average of 34% in the first year alone." Margaret finally spoke. "Mr. Morrison, this is quite an impressive presentation, but I have to ask, what makes you think you understand our industry better than people who've been doing this for decades?" There it was, the opening I'd been waiting for. "That's an excellent question, Ms. Richardson." I clicked to my final slide. It was a photo of a young man in an ill-fitting suit, standing in front of Meridian Solutions building. "This young man applied for a junior position at your company 5 years ago. He was passionate, eager, and willing to work hard. Do you remember what you told him?" The room was silent. Margaret stared at the screen, her face going pale. "You told him he was a nobody. You told him you don't waste time with juniors. You had him escorted out by security." I walked around the table, closer to where she sat. "You told him to apply somewhere more appropriate to his skill level, maybe a coffee shop." Recognition hit her like a physical blow. Her eyes widened, her mouth opened slightly. For 5 years, she'd been the villain in someone else's story, and now that someone was standing in front of her, holding the keys to her future, that young man went on to build a consulting firm that's now worth $12 million. He's taken your clients, your reputation, and now he's taking your company. I smiled, but it wasn't cruel like hers had been. It was confident, earned. "Hi, Margaret. I'm that junior you didn't waste time with." The room erupted in whispers. Board members looked between us, trying to process what they'd just witnessed. Margaret Richardson, the woman who'd built her career on intimidation and dismissal, sat frozen in her chair. "Mr. Morrison," Robert Apex said, his voice filled with something that might have been admiration. "I take it you have experience with Meridian's management style?" I do. And I can promise you that every single person in this room who's been dismissed, overlooked, or underestimated by Meridian's current leadership will be treated with the respect they deserve under new management. Margaret found her voice. This is personal vendetta. You can't make business decisions based on what? On results? On client satisfaction? On treating people with basic human dignity? I turned to address the board. Everything I've shown you today is factual. The numbers don't lie. Meridian Solutions is failing because of the culture this leadership has created. Robert Apex stood up. I think we've heard enough. Mr. Morrison, your proposal is accepted. We'll need to discuss terms, but Meridian Solutions will be restructured under Morrison Consulting's management. Margaret Richardson's world crumbled in that moment. I could see it in her eyes. The realization that her arrogance had created her own replacement. That the kid she'd dismissed as worthless had grown up to buy her company. As the meeting ended and people filed out, Margaret approached me. Her voice was barely a whisper. Jake, I don't remember you specifically, but if I was harsh, you were more than harsh, Margaret. You were cruel. But you know what? I should thank you. I buttoned my suit jacket. Every inch the successful executive she'd never believed I could become. Because that day, you didn't just reject me. You created me. She stood there, speechless, as I walked toward the door. Oh, and Margaret? We'll be making some changes to the HR department, effective immediately. 6 months later, Meridian Solutions was the most successful consulting firm in Seattle. Margaret Richardson found work at a smaller company across town. And me? I kept that photo from my first day at Meridian on my desk as a reminder. Never underestimate someone just because they're starting out. You never know when that junior might become your boss.